Lift your wife's shirt and prove she's actually pregnant, or you'll both face daily fines. That's what Marjorie Kent, vice president of Maple Ridge Estates HOA, said the moment I opened my door. She didn't blink. She didn't even lower her clipboard. She stared straight past me into the hallway where my wife, Ava, was visible, holding her stomach as if the stranger might snatch the life inside her. Marjorie pushed a paper toward me, the headline screaming, "Pregnancy Verification Order." She said our alleged pregnancy must be inspected by HOA officials, and the board demanded immediate compliance. Failure would result in disciplinary action, including removal of any unverified dependents from the home, my unborn child, reduced to a line item. Before I could respond, she leaned closer and said, "Ava could be lying, faking, seeking sympathy. Until we check her body ourselves, this won't count as a qualifying family." Her voice held smug certainty, as if women's privacy was hers to command. But there's something she didn't know. "Everything on my property is recorded," I told her quietly, letting the shift in power hang in the air. It stopped her smile just long enough to know she felt it. "Now? Before I show you how far she went after this moment, tell me where you're watching from. Because people like her are everywhere, and most neighbors have no idea until it's too late." My name is Ethan Morales. I'm a licensed private investigator and former Air Force Security Forces. I've spent years exposing abuse of authority, but today the battle came to my front porch, and it threatened the only thing that mattered, Ava's pregnancy. We waited 5 years for this miracle, lost 2 before this one. That kind of pain changes you. Hope becomes something fragile you protect with every breath. Ava has a medically fragile pregnancy. Our doctor said stress could risk everything. That's why I built the porch swing by the lake, to give her a place to feel safe. It's the first thing she touches every morning, her hands tracing the wood, like she's reminding herself she's still here, still carrying life. That swing is our symbol of survival. Marjorie's eyes darted to it. "Unapproved construction," she announced. "It will be removed." Just like that, our peace became contraband. She stepped forward, trying to look past me again, measuring Ava like she was lying about the bump beneath her dress. I moved, blocking her view entirely. The restraint in my jaw was a miracle. "You're hiding something," she hissed. "Mothers don't need to conceal proof." Ava gasped behind me. Her hand trembled against the wall. I knew her mind was already spiraling into what-ifs. What if this stress hurt the baby? What if we had to move again? What if all the hope we'd rebuilt collapsed in a single moment of cruelty? I kept my voice calm, but every word was loaded steel. "You need to leave our property." Marjorie ignored it. She raised her clipboard higher and wrote us up for non-cooperative maternal conduct, a made-up violation, a weapon she crafted purely to hurt. She said she had full authority to ensure Maple Ridge remained a respectable neighborhood, which apparently meant policing wombs. I recognized obsession. I recognized someone drunk on power. I recognized the moment a bully thinks they can break you. She promised this was just the beginning, that the HOA would get their proof, whether we liked it or not. Behind me, the porch light flickered with the wind. The lake shimmered in the distance. The swing creaked under its own weight, like it feared being torn away. I pictured Ava sitting there on the mornings she whispered to our child. I pictured the empty space if someone like Marjorie got their way. This wasn't just a rule dispute. This was an attack on our home, our family, our future. I watched Marjorie march down the driveway, plotting her next move. Cameras captured everything, but evidence isn't enough unless you're willing to use it. I wasn't looking for a fight, but she brought one to my wife's door. And if she thinks fear will make us give up, she hasn't met a father who has already lost too much. I watched Marjorie's silhouette shrink as she marched down the driveway, clipboard clutched like a weapon. The cameras caught every step, every sneer, every attempt to force her way inside. I closed the door slowly, trying not to let Ava see the rage twisting through me. But when I turned, she was already collapsing onto the couch, clutching her stomach with both hands. Her breathing was fast, uneven. I knelt beside her and whispered that she was safe, that no one would touch her. The lie tasted sharp, because I knew people like Marjorie didn't stop when told to. They came back with reinforcements. I got Ava water and urged her to rest, but she refused to lie down in the bedroom, where the windows now felt like targets. She stayed curled on the couch, eyes locked to the door like she expected another knock. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. So while Ava tried to steady her breathing, I slipped outside to assess the damage Marjorie had already begun. The porch swing, our sanctuary, now had a fluorescent orange violation sticker slapped across the armrest. Unauthorized structure. Remove immediately. The ink wasn't even dry. I moved closer, fingers brushing over the rough adhesive edges. If she succeeded in dismantling the swing, it wouldn't just be wood she was ripping apart. It'd be the one peaceful thing Ava had left. I peeled the sticker off, pocketing it as evidence. Then I turned my focus to what else Marjorie might have done. Our mailbox had a new notice shoved inside, dated only minutes ago. A printed sheet outlining family verification rules, including mandatory pregnancy inspections conducted by approved HOA personnel. It wasn't signed by the full board, only Marjorie. That meant she was acting alone or hiding something. I needed to know which. I headed toward the HOA bulletin board near the walking trail, a place everyone passed daily. The district map, community reminders, and volunteer event posters all hung there. But now, pinned right at the center, were printed complaints about expecting families, creating false impressions to gain neighborhood benefits. No names listed, but the target was obvious. And ours wasn't the only sign. 2 other pregnancy announcements had scribbled red question marks beside them. One couple was expecting twins. Another had adopted a toddler and had their family photo defaced. This wasn't random, it was a pattern. I took photos from every angle, documenting the hostile messaging. People walked past me, some with sympathetic glances, others with narrowed eyes, as if unsure whether to believe the rumors. Marjorie was poisoning the community against us one whisper at a time. A cart rolled by. The maintenance guy, out to change light bulbs on the trail. He leaned close enough to speak quietly without being seen. "Watch your back," he muttered. "She's been building this case for weeks." He didn't wait for me to respond. He just kept rolling, head down, like speaking to me was already dangerous. The wind blew through the trees, a reminder that even calm places carried threats. I walked further along the path and saw the lake shimmer behind the bushes. Families usually picnicked there on Saturdays. Today it felt empty, like everyone was hiding behind curtains waiting to see who would fall first. Evidence was mounting. A harassment pattern, discriminatory targeting, retaliatory fines. If I could show this was systemic, not just against us, then I'd have leverage. Outside authorities don't intervene in a neighborly disagreement, but discrimination and privacy violations, they step in fast. My phone buzzed, Ava texting, "Are you okay? It's too quiet." I hurried back toward the house, scanning the sidewalks, making sure no one else had approached while my guard was down. When I got home, Ava had moved to the porch swing despite her fear. She looked small in the growing twilight, her hand tracing circles across her belly, trying to calm the life inside. I told her what I found, carefully, leaving out the ugliest parts. She nodded, swallowing tears she didn't want me to see. She said we could leave if we had to. Start over, somewhere new, somewhere safe. I couldn't let that happen. We bought this home for our child's future. The lake, the swing, the nursery already painted a soft sky blue. This was supposed to be where hope finally stayed. I promised Ava that no one would take what we'd fought so hard to build. The front yard lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the lawn. For the first time since we moved here, the neighborhood felt hostile. Homes with white fences and trimmed hedges now looked like silent judges watching us struggle. I stood, next to the porch swing, one hand gripping the frame. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was a coordinated effort to control who was allowed to become a parent within these gates. It was personal, it was dangerous, and it wasn't going to stop on its own. I'd collected enough to prove Marjorie was abusing her authority. But if I was going to protect Ava and our baby, I needed a plan. I needed the right people watching, because if Marjorie wanted war, she'd just declared it on the wrong man. I stayed beside Ava until her breathing steadied, but I couldn't sit there waiting for the next attack. I told her I needed to take a walk and calm down. Truth was, I needed to learn who else Marjorie had convinced to follow her lead. The only place where HOA gossip spilled freely was the community garden near the clubhouse. Neighbors liked to pretend they were planting vegetables together. But really, it was a battlefield of whispers and alliances. If Marjorie was spreading lies, they would be rooted there. The sun was dipping low when I arrived. 3 residents were chatting near a row of tomato stakes, laughter dying the second they saw me. A woman clutched her basket a little tighter as she stepped aside. Another pretended to examine a wilted leaf. Their silence was louder than accusations. They'd already heard her rumors. They already had doubts. I walked farther in, pretending to care about the herbs while I listened. Soft voices behind me, pregnancy, swinging seat, faking it. My blood heated, but anger had to wait. Evidence mattered more. That's when I saw him. Jeremy Cole stood at the far end of the garden, by the potting shed, his posture stiff and awkward. He was a newer board member, early 30s, glasses always slipping down his nose, a man who seemed forever stuck between yes and no. He was the kind of person who apologized to furniture after bumping into it, and tonight, he looked like he wished he were invisible. His eyes met mine, then quickly dropped to the soil. His hands fidgeted with a pair of gardening gloves, twisting them into knots. It wasn't guilt that made him nervous. It was fear. He knew something big. I approached slowly, not wanting to spook him. He flinched anyway, shoulders tightening like he expected someone to drag him away for talking to me. That alone told me how deep Marjorie's intimidation ran. "You shouldn't be out here right now," he muttered, barely audible, pretending to check the sprouting carrots. His voice trembled like every word was a risk. His gaze scanned the edges of the garden, searching for witnesses. He wouldn't look at me for more than half a second, eyes darting as if the air itself might tattletale. "What do you think she'll do next?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He swallowed hard, the gloves twisted again, tighter, until his knuckles went white. He wanted to answer. Every inch of his body showed it, feet shifting, lips pressed thin, breath shaky. But fear pinned him in place. He whispered, "Marjorie's not supposed to create new enforcement rules alone." The sentence came out fast, like he was trying to rip off a bandage. Then he shook his head in regret, shoulders collapsing inward like he'd already said too much. Unauthorized rules. That confirmed she was acting beyond the HOA's legal structure. It meant leverage. But I needed more. Jeremy stepped back when someone else appeared near the entrance, a tall man in joggers, scanning the area. Jeremy's fingers froze around the gloves, refusing to move. Sweat formed near his temple despite the cool air. He wouldn't speak with anyone else around. I leaned closer, low enough only he could hear. "You know this is wrong. You know what she's doing to Ava." His swallow was visible, heavy. Guilt and conflict warred across his face, jaw tightening, then loosening, eyes blinking fast. He looked toward the clubhouse as if the building itself might punish him for even listening to me. Finally, his voice cracked out. "She thinks, if she proves someone lied about pregnancy, she'll get the board presidency this year." A single sentence, but explosive. Motive. Power grab. A clear reason she was attacking us specifically and pushing new rules dangerously fast. I asked who else she'd targeted. His breaths turned shallow, almost panicked. He looked away, shoulders curling inward like he was bracing for impact. Then he shook his head once, sharply, signaling this was as far as he could go in public. But then he slipped something into my hand. A folded sticky note with a time and location scribbled on it. "Park bench by lake, 10 p.m., no phones." His eyes finally met mine, wide, desperate, pleading for protection without saying it. He was terrified of the person he served under, terrified of what she'd do if she learned he spoke to me. He backed away slowly, keeping his head down like he'd been scolded, disappearing behind a row of tall sunflowers. Gone in seconds. I unfolded the note once he was out of sight. A secret meeting, a private conversation, a possible ally. And every sign of his body, shaking hands, rapid blinks, feet restless, told me he was caught between conscience and fear. If he was risking this much to warn me, we weren't facing an HOA dispute. We were facing something darker running quietly beneath Maple Ridge. I tucked the note in my pocket and walked back toward home. The night would bring answers, and with them, the first crack in Marjorie's power. I walked home from the garden, gripping the note in my pocket, feeling the weight of what it represented. An ally, a witness, someone inside the HOA who knew Marjorie was fabricating authority as fast as she could print forms. The sun had fully set by the time I reached the house, and I opened the door quietly so I wouldn't startle Ava. She was asleep on the couch, curled around a pillow like it could shield her from the world outside. I covered her with a blanket, and stood there a moment just watching her breathe. Every rise of her chest reminded me what was at stake. I checked the porch swing through the window. The violation sticker was gone thanks to me, but the frame still bore faint adhesive residue. I'd fix that tomorrow. For tonight, I had something else to prepare for. 10 p.m., lake bench, no phones. Jeremy was terrified, which meant the information he had wasn't just gossip, it was dangerous. I set up our security system to alert me if anyone came near the house. Then I grabbed a flashlight and slipped out the side gate, staying close to the shadows as I moved. The walking trail behind the houses was dimly lit by motion sensor path lights. The lake's surface reflected tiny glimmers like scattered stars. Maple Ridge marketed this view as the serenity of suburban perfection. Tonight, it felt like hostile territory. I scanned the area, checking every corner for people hiding in the dark. Old instincts die hard. When I reached the bench overlooking the water, I didn't sit. I stood with my back to a tree, waiting. Then I saw her. A figure on the opposite side of the lake. A camera lens glinting in the lamplight. Marjorie. She wasn't even trying to hide. She stood there photographing my house from a distance. Zoom pointed directly into the living room where Ava slept. She was building a case based on stolen images, trying to show the board we were unstable, non-compliant, undeserving. I lifted my flashlight, shining it across the lake directly into her face. She jerked the camera down, startled. For a second, her expression fell from smug superiority to pure fear. Then she turned, storming away, heels clicking against the concrete path. But before disappearing, she pointed at me and mouthed something unmistakable. "You will lose." Her surveillance wasn't careless, it was strategic. The closer she got to violating legal boundaries, the more reckless she became, and the more evidence I gained against her. I followed her retreat with the camera on my phone, documenting her presence and direction. If she thought she could intimidate me into surrendering, she underestimated the lengths a father would go to protect his family. A twig snapped behind me. My muscles tensed until I saw Jeremy emerging from the shadows, nearly tripping over himself in panic. He scanned everywhere like he expected Marjorie to materialize out of the dark again. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he hunched his shoulders and paced around the bench, arms locked tight across his chest, breaths shallow and uneven. He kept rubbing the back of his neck, fingers trembling. The guilt of silence was crushing him. I let him gather himself. Finally, he blurted out, "She's been watching pregnant women for months." His voice cracked with each word. "She believes people fake pregnancies for tax breaks. She thinks she's exposing fraud." His jaw clenched, then loosened, then clenched. Again, a man fighting a war inside his own head. He confessed there were meetings behind closed doors, lists, targets, and my wife's name circled at the top, marked as priority verification. His eyes filled with regret as he admitted he didn't vote for any of it. But he hadn't voted against it either. Fear had made him complicit. I asked why Marjorie chose Ava specifically. Jeremy swallowed hard. "You announced too early," he said. "She thinks that means you're lying, and when you refused the inspection, that confirmed her suspicion." My fists curled, nails cutting into my palm. Ava had shared her joy with the world for the first time, and our happiness triggered someone sick enough to weaponize it. Jeremy's voice dropped even lower. "She's planning to rewrite enforcement authority this week. If she convinces just 2 more board members, she'll have the power to force inspections on every pregnant woman here." He stepped closer, desperation visible in every nervous twitch. "You need to stop her," he whispered, "because if you don't, she'll ruin you." I promised him his name would never appear in anything I filed. Relief flickered briefly across his face, but fear swallowed it again. He shoved a sealed envelope into my hand. Proof, notes, maybe more, and ran back into the darkness as fast as he arrived. I looked down at the envelope, pulse pounding. I didn't know exactly what was inside yet, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Marjorie wasn't just harassing us. She was building a system of control, one that needed to be dismantled before it spread any further. Tomorrow, I'd make the first move. Tonight, I'd watch over my family, and I'd make damn sure Marjorie never got close enough to try again. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marjorie pointing that camera at our windows, imagining how many photos she already had stored, how many angles she'd try to twist into evidence. Ava slept lightly, waking every so often with a hand pressed to her belly, like she was shielding the baby from nightmares. By morning, I'd made a decision. Watching and waiting wasn't going to protect us. I needed to get ahead of her, and I had exactly what I needed: surveillance footage, the violation sticker, the mailbox notice, the board policy printouts, and now the sealed envelope Jeremy risked everything to hand me. Ava asked where I was going when she woke and saw me putting on my jacket. I told her the truth, just not all of it. She didn't need to feel the full weight of what we were facing when she was already fighting to keep our child alive. "I'll be back in a few hours," I promised, brushing my hand over hers gently. "Rest as long as you need." The county courthouse wasn't far, just a 15-minute drive past the shopping center and the newly built charter school Maple Ridge bragged about in every real estate brochure. As I pulled into the HOA lot, I rehearsed the order of evidence in my mind: organized, chronological, irrefutable, not the ranting of an angry husband. A legal truth the judge couldn't ignore. The clerk behind the counter looked up as I approached, with a folder thick enough to be a report. She blinked when I explained I needed a restraining order based on harassment, stalking, and attempts at illegal medical intrusion. She didn't laugh or dismiss me. Her eyes narrowed in recognition. She'd heard Marjorie's name before. That alone told me I wasn't the first. She directed me to fill out forms detailing every incident. I wrote until my hand cramped: dates, times, the exact words she used questioning my wife's pregnancy, the unauthorized surveillance, the intimidation disguised as policy enforcement. I included screenshots, attached video stills, logged the mailbox notices, and referenced the HOA bulletin board accusations. While scanning the documents, the clerk paused at the phrase, "pregnancy verification inspection." Her eyebrows lifted just slightly. That small reaction felt like validation, proof that this situation was not normal, not acceptable, not something an HOA should ever have authority over. She stamped my request and sent it directly to the docket with urgency that surprised me. When my name was called, I stepped into a small courtroom where a judge reviewed the packet silently while I stood waiting, every muscle tense. After several long minutes, he finally nodded. "This isn't just harassment," he said. "This is an abuse of power." He granted a temporary restraining order, effective immediately. Marjorie was legally barred from approaching our home or contacting Ava in any form. The judge instructed deputies to notify her before the end of the day and said he would forward parts of the case to the City Housing Authority to review potential HOA violations. There was still a long fight ahead, but this was our first real win, a shield between Ava and the woman obsessed with tearing her down. Walking out of that courthouse carrying a legal document that defended my family felt like breathing for the first time in days. But I didn't forget the deeper danger. Marjorie wasn't acting alone, and she wouldn't take the restriction quietly. People hungry for power see legal boundaries as challenges, not barriers. I got into my truck, placed the restraining order in the passenger seat beside Jeremy's envelope, and exhaled. One step forward, one claim of solid ground in a war that still wasn't over. I unlocked my phone and snapped a photo of the document so I could send a copy directly to the HOA board and attach it to our property's digital records. Before driving home, I stared at the courthouse entrance and realized something important. We weren't isolated. Others must have faced similar attacks, just not as severe. This wasn't the moment to fight alone. I needed allies. I needed oversight. I needed the kind of pressure that even a power-drunk HOA official couldn't ignore. Which brings me to you. If you believe homeowners shouldn't be bullied, especially when a mother and unborn child are the targets, make sure you're locked in here, because what happens next, every homeowner should know about. When I got home, Ava was sitting on the porch swing again, sunlight warming her face. She looked up with a hopeful kind of caution. I told her, "You're protected. She can't come near you anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, not fear this time, but relief. She leaned into me with a whisper of a smile and rested her head on my shoulder. For a moment, the world fell silent around us. The breeze, the lake, the gentle creak of the swing, it all felt right again. But deep down, I knew Marjorie wasn't done. She'd see this order as a challenge, and the next time she came at us, she'd come harder. She'd come smarter. She'd come desperate. I wasn't afraid. Now, I was ready. Ava fell asleep against my shoulder on the porch swing, the kind of rest she hadn't felt in days. I let her sleep as long as I could, memorizing the peace on her face because I knew it wouldn't last. When she finally woke, she asked if we could try something normal, just once, before the world crashed in again. The HOA was hosting a community cookout that afternoon at the neighborhood park, meant to celebrate family values. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, but if Marjorie was spreading lies, then hiding would only confirm them. So we went. The park was a playground of forced smiles and folded lawn chairs. The smell of grilled burgers drifted through the air. Kids bumped into each other playing tag, while parents tried to look invested in small talk. A big white banner fluttered above the gazebo. Maple Ridge Family Unity Day. Seeing the word family there made something tighten in my chest. Ava held my hand the entire walk over, squeezing gently each time a neighbor stared too long at her stomach. Some gave polite nods, unsure what side of this quiet war to stand on. Others looked away quickly, guilt written in their avoidance. But there were a few, 3 women near the drinks table, who whispered the moment we passed. One pointed right at Ava, the other shook her head with disgust. The rumor was spreading like wildfire. I scanned the crowd. I didn't see Marjorie. For a brief moment, I let myself breathe, until a microphone squealed and her voice slithered through the speaker system. "Welcome, Maple Ridge families," she announced, stepping up onto the small stage like she owned the ground beneath her feet. "Thank you for joining us in celebrating integrity and honesty within our community." She emphasized honesty, eyes sweeping until they landed on Ava, until they pinned her like a butterfly to a display board. Ava inhaled sharply, shoulders curling inward. I stepped in front of her, blocking the view, jaw tightening with every syllable Marjorie spoke. "And remember," she continued sweetly, "our HOA bylaws exist to protect all residents from fraudulent behavior." The crowd murmured. Someone chuckled. Someone else shifted uncomfortably. Ava pressed her hand to her belly, as if shielding the baby from Marjorie's venomous stare. I leaned closer to Ava and whispered that we could leave, but she shook her head. "I don't want her to think she won," she murmured, voice fragile yet defiant. My wife was braver than she knew. Marjorie took a dramatic pause before listing a series of upcoming policy revisions, her tone cheerful and cruel all at once. They included mandatory family status documentation, unannounced residency checks, and the one that made my blood run cold: immediate inspection rights in cases of suspected deception. She was trying to rewrite the rules around the restraining order, just like Jeremy warned, and she was doing it in broad daylight, wrapped in festive bunting and family slogans. Then she slipped. She referenced the restraining order, claiming our legal action was an overreaction rooted in guilt, and proof something was being hidden behind closed doors. The entire cookout froze. Even the kids went quiet. She'd violated the order just by mentioning it publicly. I pulled out my phone and hit record, catching every word, every accusation. Ava's breathing changed, sharp, panicked. She swayed slightly. Her pregnancy made sudden spikes of stress dangerous. I guided her to a bench under a shade tree, trying to get her to focus on my voice instead of the venom being amplified over speakers. That's when a neighbor I barely recognized approached, Sarah from the cul-de-sac. She handed Ava a bottle of water with trembling fingers. "We believe you," she whispered. "She's out of control." It was the first moment of solidarity we'd been offered. Ava thanked her with a grateful smile, eyes glassy. That one act of kindness cut through the cruelty surrounding us. But Marjorie wasn't finished. She ended her speech by announcing a special board vote scheduled for Tuesday night, where she would finalize the pregnancy inspection authority. The crowd clapped weakly, mostly out of obligation. Jeremy stood near the gazebo, shoulders stiff, eyes locked on the ground like a man trying not to drown. As the music resumed and people scattered to grab food, Ava gripped my hand so tightly I could feel her pulse in her palm. She whispered, "She won't stop, Ethan." I nodded. "No," I said, voice steady. "But neither will I." We stayed only long enough for Ava to regain her breath. Then we walked home quietly, the restraining order burning in my pocket like a challenge. Marjorie wanted to make our family a public spectacle. She wanted to bully us into submission, but she forgot something important. When you threaten a mother and child, you wake the protector in the shadows. And now, she'd given me exactly what I Needed, her violations recorded in front of an entire neighborhood. This wasn't fear anymore. This was fuel. We barely stepped through the front door before Ava sank onto the couch, exhausted from holding herself together in front of everyone. I gathered pillows behind her, trying to cushion the shaking I knew she would try to hide. She whispered that she felt dizzy, that her heart was racing too fast. I checked her pulse and held her hand until her breathing steadied again. She shouldn't have had to endure any of that. Being judged, mocked, treated like her pregnancy was a crime. I told her to stay resting while I made us something to eat, pretending calm, even though my insides felt like barbed wire. I walked into the kitchen, grabbing a glass of water, when a faint knock echoed from the side door, the one no one ever used. My stomach tightened. I set the glass down and walked over cautiously. When I opened it, Jeremy stood there in the dim porch light, arms wrapped around himself like he was cold, or like he was terrified someone might see him here. His gaze flicked over my shoulder to check if Ava was visible. When he saw she was resting, his shoulders sagged with relief. He stepped inside quickly, shutting the door behind him with a soft click. He didn't speak at first. He paced once, then twice, fingers holding his elbows like he was trying to keep himself from falling apart. "You recording?" he asked, voice shaky. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Always." He nodded like that was the only thing keeping him brave. Then the truth started to spill. "She's not just doing this for power," he whispered. "There's money involved. Big money." His voice wavered, but he forced himself to continue. "The HOA board applied for a state program, grants and incentives for communities with a certain number of registered families. Verified families. Biological dependents only, no exceptions." I felt rage flare beneath my ribs. A government program wasn't the problem. Marjorie weaponizing it was. Jeremy rubbed his palms against his jeans, pacing again. "She thinks if she can prove at least one family lied about pregnancy, she'll show she's the only one strong enough to enforce honesty. She wants to be HOA president by the next cycle, and she's using your wife as her proof." He paused then, breathing too fast, hand pressed to his forehead. "That's why she keeps saying Ava could be faking," he added. "She's convinced herself this is some kind of righteous crusade." I gripped the back of a chair to keep my composure. "Is she forging authority?" I asked. "Those new rules she's pushing, are they even real?" Jeremy swallowed and forced himself to nod. "None of it's legal. She printed forms that look official, but no state agency wrote them. She's been doctoring documents, signatures, seals, everything. She even drafted a fake memo saying the HOA has the right to request medical inspections." There it was, fraud, harassment, privacy violations. Every word out of his mouth was a brick in the wall I needed to build to crush her attempts. I had the restraining order. I had evidence of surveillance. Now I had proof she fabricated authority to enforce her obsession. Jeremy's hands were shaking uncontrollably. "I voted against the inspection policy," he said, eyes glistening. "But she bullied the others, threatened to bury anyone who didn't comply. She told me she'd ruin my career if I mentioned the forgery." "How many board members know?" I asked. "2, and they're terrified. Nobody wants to cross her." Ava shifted in the living room, and Jeremy froze, looking sick with guilt. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "Your wife shouldn't be dragged into this. None of this should have happened." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a flash drive. He pressed it into my hand like it was a live grenade. "It has everything," he said, voice thin. "Emails, drafts of the policies, her notes about targeting your family." He hesitated, then added, "She has a folder labeled Morales, primary violation. It's a lot." He stepped back, ready to flee before fear won and forced him silent again. "Please," he begged quietly, "stop her before she destroys someone's life." He looked toward the windows once more, making sure no one had followed him, then slipped out the door as quickly as he arrived, like a ghost disappearing back into a haunting. I locked the door and turned around slowly, gripping the flash drive so tight it dug into my palm. It contained the weapon I needed, the proof that outside authorities would take seriously, the kind capable of dismantling the entire rotten structure Marjorie had built. Ava was awake now, staring at me from the couch, worry etched across her face. I walked over and knelt beside her again. I promised her she wouldn't have to fight anymore, that I would take this all the way to the top if I had to. Marjorie thought she could break us by turning our pregnancy into her battleground. She didn't realize she'd just handed me the ammunition to end her war. I held the flash drive like it was a lifeline, because that's exactly what it was. Proof of forgery, harassment, obsession, everything that could bring outside authority crashing down on Marjorie's empire. Ava sat watching me, her eyes searching my face for some sign that this nightmare would end soon. I kissed her forehead and told her to rest again, that I was going to make sure our child grew up somewhere safe. She nodded, trusting me in that quiet way she always did. That trust fueled everything I did next. I moved into my home office, closing the door gently behind me. The room was small but secure, my command center. Shelves of case files, coded index systems, and hardware from my PI days surrounded me like armor. I plugged in the flash drive. A folder named Confidential, Executive Board Only appeared instantly. I opened it and scanned files one by one, forged state seals, fake medical inspection policies, email threads where Marjorie bullied and blackmailed other board members. And the worst, a document labeled Morales, Primary Violation, exactly as Jeremy warned. Lists of accusations, photos taken through our windows, timestamps of when Ava walked to the swing or stepped onto our lawn. She had been watching us for weeks, building a twisted case she believed would make her the hero of Maple Ridge. My fingers trembled over the keyboard, not with fear, with clarity. This wasn't just HOA harassment or some petty power trip. She wanted to control who was allowed to have a family in this neighborhood. And she chose Ava as the example she planned to destroy. I compiled everything into a single report. Abuse of power, stalking, fraudulent documentation, medical discrimination, targeted harassment. I included video clips from the night she stared into our windows, and audio from her public speech at the cookout. When I hit save, it felt like loading a bullet into the chamber. Now I needed to aim it right. I opened my email tab. The first message went to the State Attorney General's Office, Civil Rights Division. Subject line: Urgent. HOA discrimination and forgery targeting pregnant resident. I attached the full report, plus the restraining order and links to video evidence. The second message went to a local investigative reporter known for covering HOA abuse stories, a woman named Danielle Hayes. Subject line: Exclusive via HOA forging medical authority to control pregnant residents. I didn't have to exaggerate. Truth was enough to ignite outrage. The third communication wasn't digital. I called a contact from my Air Force days, a friend who now worked in a city housing authority oversight unit. When he answered, I kept my voice controlled, professional. I explained everything, sticking to facts rather than emotion. He listened without interruption, and when I finished, he said only 2 words: "We're coming." I leaned back in my chair, feeling some pressure finally lift off my chest. I'd just lit a fuse underneath the foundation Marjorie stood on. It wouldn't take long before the ground shifted beneath her feet. There was still one more step. I drafted a message to the HOA board, not aggressive, not emotional, just notification of the restraining order, the case filed, and the agency's now reviewing board operations. Before sending, I looked at the final line. I recommend immediate suspension of any policy proposals involving medical inspections. It was my version of a warning shot. Then I hit send. I glanced at the clock, close to midnight. Ava was sleeping again in the living room, curled under the blanket like someone who'd been running from fear too long. She didn't know what I'd done yet, but she would soon feel the impact. I stepped out of the office quietly, and here's something important. If you're following this story, if you believe abuse of authority should never win, make sure you're subscribed, because the moment everything detonates, you're going to want to see it. I returned to the porch swing and sat beside Ava, letting the night breeze cool the adrenaline still burning through my veins. Across the lake, Maple Ridge streetlights reflected on the water like tiny warnings. Somewhere in one of those houses, Marjorie slept soundly, convinced she was untouchable, convinced she still held the power. But what she didn't know was that her downfall was already on its way. The emails were sent, the authorities alerted, the reporter briefed. She picked a fight with a man trained to finish what he starts, and before long, the whole neighborhood would see exactly what kind of monster they had put in charge. Ava slept peacefully, curled against my shoulder on the porch swing, as the night softened into early morning. I stayed awake, watching the sky change colors and listening for any sound that didn't belong. The knowledge of what I'd set in motion pulsed steady in my veins. The emails were sent, the evidence was building, but action like this takes cooperation and coordination. If I wanted this to land the right way, I needed to ensure every step hit at the exact moment Marjorie made her final move. After Ava woke and I made sure she'd eaten, I told her I'd be gone for a couple hours. She pressed her hand to my chest and asked if I'd be safe. I told her yes. I lied a little. Because going to the public library, the only place in Maple Ridge where information felt neutral, meant leaving the safety of home. But the library also had private study rooms, secure networks, and space I could use to finalize my strike. I drove there as the town came alive. Joggers on sidewalks, garage doors opening, sprinklers ticking across manicured lawns. This neighborhood looked like paradise from the outside, and that's exactly why Marjorie operated like she did. Abuse hides easiest behind perfection. Inside the library, cool air and the familiar smell of books made my pulse slow just a little. I booked a small private room with a glass window facing the aisles. I set down my folder, laptop, and the flash drive, my arsenal, and locked the door behind me. Before anything else, I called the City Housing Authority contact. He answered on the first ring. "We're reviewing materials," he said. "Your HOA board meeting is Tuesday night, correct?" I confirmed. He told me they'd be ready. I could hear papers shuffling in the background, energy rising. He believed me. That meant momentum. Next, I opened a secure call with Danielle, the investigative reporter. Her voice carried that edge reporters get when they smell a real story. "You have documentation of a forged government seal?" she asked. I confirmed again. Silence followed, just long enough to feel the gravity of what we were doing. Then she said she would attend the meeting in person, and she would not be alone. While my laptop hummed with encrypted data transfers, I created a detailed timeline of Marjorie's behavior, form submission dates, surveillance timestamps, witness statements, board policy drafts, our doctor's warning about Ava's stress condition. Every detail was arranged to draw a straight line between her actions and intent to harm. If you want justice to hit hard, you make sure it hits clean. As I worked, a shadow moved in the hallway. Jeremy. He hesitated outside the glass door like he might bolt. I waved him in silently. He looked around before stepping inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't sit. Instead, he hovered by the wall, arms folded tight across his chest, anxiety squeezing his shoulders up near his ears. "I told the others," he whispered, "about the restraining order, about what she's been doing. I thought maybe they would stand up to her." "And?" I asked, even though the tension in his posture already told me the answer. "They're scared," he said. "She threatened lawsuits, fines, even eviction proceedings. She said she'd make sure their children couldn't attend the charter school if they crossed her." His jaw clenched. "She's blackmailing them with their own lives." That was a bigger threat than even I expected. She wasn't afraid of breaking rules. She was rewriting them through fear. I showed him part of the timeline and the copies of forged documents. His breath caught. He reached out but stopped just short of touching the screen, like the evidence itself burned. "This is enough to remove her," he whispered. "This could get her arrested." "That's the plan," I said. He met my eyes then. Really met them. Something shifting behind his thick glasses. "Thank you," he murmured, "for not backing down, for protecting your wife." It sounded like a confession of cowardice, but it was actually courage inching its way forward. I told him he'd done enough, that he didn't need to put himself in further danger. But he shook his head, the first sign of resolve replacing fear. "I'll testify," he said. "She won't silence me anymore." Those 5 words turned a witness into a partner. We coordinated the final details. He would alert me the moment Marjorie attempted the policy vote. The timing had to be perfect. Authorities needed her caught in the act, public, visible, recorded. I packed everything up, slid the flash drive back into its case, and placed a supportive hand on Jeremy's shoulder. He steadied himself, took a breath, and left, walking taller than he had the night before. As I gathered my things and walked to the truck, one thought kept repeating through my head like a drumbeat. Tuesday night would be the end of her tyranny. And it would be the moment the whole neighborhood learned that a father, protecting his family isn't just hard to stop, he's impossible. Tuesday came faster than I expected. All day the neighborhood felt like a coiled spring. People watered lawns slower. Conversations stopped when I walked by. Kids didn't play near our house anymore. Everyone sensed something was about to break. They just didn't know who would be crushed underneath it. Ava stayed inside, feet propped up, following the doctor's orders for rest. Every time I glanced at her, I remembered who I was fighting for. Every moment I wasn't by her side felt like leaving her unguarded, but I had to finish what I started. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock at the community center, the heart of Maple Ridge. It looked harmless from the outside. Red brick, big windows, banners with watercolor paintings of lakeside sunsets. But it was where Marjorie planned to grab power and rip away the last piece of peace we had left. I left early, giving Ava a kiss on her forehead. She told me to be careful. I promised I would. Then I armed myself, the folder, the notarized restraining order copy, and a backup drive with every piece of evidence. When I arrived, the parking lot was already half full. Residents trickled inside, carrying casseroles and reusable water bottles, pretending this was another boring HOA meeting. I stood near the lobby entrance and felt eyes landing on me. Curious, skeptical, some supportive, but none hostile enough to matter. Not yet. The board sat at a long table at the front of the hall. Marjorie stood in the center like she was presiding over a royal trial. She wore a pearl necklace that looked like it choked more than it accessorized. Her smile was sharp enough to cut through drywall. Jeremy caught my eye and gave a small nod from his place near the board members. His nerves were visible, foot tapping, fingers twitching against his notepad. But he was here. He showed up. That alone meant something was shifting. I chose a seat near the aisle where I had a clear view of everything, especially the exit. I didn't trust Marjorie not to try something desperate. The room buzzed with low chatter until she raised her gavel and tapped the table. "Order," she announced with triumphant sweetness. "Tonight, we finalized the family verification enforcement policy, protecting our community from fraudulent behavior." There it was, her power grab dressed as moral duty. She clicked a remote, and a slide appeared on the projector screen, a distorted version of the policy with official-seeming seals and language. My pulse remained steady. I had the real truth in my folder, and the authorities were already nearby, waiting for the moment she stepped outside legal bounds. "For the safety and integrity of Maple Ridge," she continued, "the HOA shall have the right to require physical proof of pregnancy from—" She never finished that sentence. The back doors swung open. Uniformed sheriff deputies stepped inside first. Behind them, 2 representatives from the City Housing Authority, and then Danielle, camera crew in tow, microphones ready, eyes sharp and hungry. Conversations halted instantly. Chairs creaked as people leaned back in surprise. Marjorie's face drained of color so fast it looked like someone unplugged her. I stood slowly, folder in one hand, restraining order in the other. "You are currently violating a lawful court order," I said, loud enough for every resident to hear, "and engaging in forgery, medical discrimination, and harassment." The deputies crossed the room before she could respond, serving her with documentation. "You're to cease all contact and enforcement involving the Morales family," one deputy said, "effective immediately." Her shock lasted only a heartbeat before anger exploded behind her eyes. "He's lying!" she snapped, pointing at me like she wished her finger were a weapon. "They're manipulating the system. This is a conspiracy." Jeremy stood from his chair. His voice wavered at first, but found strength as he continued. "She fabricated documents, she forged state signatures, she threatened board members to approve unlawful policies, and she targeted a pregnant woman suffering medical stress to make herself look powerful." Gasps crawled across the crowd. Heads turned, people murmured. The entire facade of perfection Marjorie curated was crumbling, right here, right now, under the fluorescent lights of the HOA hall. A city official stepped forward. "The state is launching a full investigation into governance violations. Until then, you are suspended from all board duties." Marjorie opened her mouth, but nothing came out except rage and desperation. A choking sound like reality finally had her by the throat. The projector behind her still displayed her fake policy, now undeniable evidence. I didn't move as deputies guided her away. I didn't gloat. I just met her eyes one last time so she could see exactly who ended her reign. The father she thought she could bully into surrender. As she was led out the doors, the porch swing flashed across my mind. Ava's sanctuary, our child's future, the reason I never broke. The room erupted into whispers, neighbors turning to each other in shocked realization that the woman they feared wasn't powerful, just reckless. The board scrambled. Jeremy took control, voice trembling but resolute. We will be undoing every action taken under her leadership. I sat down, finally letting myself exhale. The first battle was over, and we won. But the real relief wouldn't come until I returned home, until Ava knew we were safe again. The moment Marjorie was escorted out of the meeting hall, the room erupted into confusion. People whispered wildly, chairs scraped as residents stood, and the projector screen still glowed with her fraudulent policy, like a reminder of how close she came to taking control. I remained seated for a moment, grounding myself. The adrenaline that carried me through the confrontation now pulsed through my veins, making my hands shake. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The board still needed to face the truth in front of the community they failed to protect. Jeremy stepped up to the podium, straightening his shoulders despite the tremor in his hands. Everyone, he began, voice cracking before he regained control. Please take your seats. Slowly, people settled back down. Their eyes swung between him and me, between authority and the one who challenged it. A room full of fear, learning how to trust again. As acting board lead, he continued, I'm officially removing the family verification enforcement proposal from discussion. The relief in the room was visible, a collective exhale that loosened tension knotted for weeks. Some residents even clapped quietly, though most still looked stunned. I stood then, stepping into the center aisle. The crowd's attention shifted toward me immediately. No microphone needed. The silence carried my voice. My name is Ethan Morales, I said, and I'm a private investigator. I didn't come to Maple Ridge looking for a fight. I came here to build a home for my wife and our unborn child. I paused long enough to let that sit in their minds. Faces softened. People leaned forward. But when the person elected to protect this community started spying on my family, questioning our child's existence, and rewriting laws to have control over pregnant women, she crossed every line that makes a neighborhood safe. Someone in the back shouted, "We didn't know!" I nodded, acknowledging them. Of course you didn't, I replied. She hid everything behind closed doors. She used fear to silence those who tried to speak up. My eyes found Jeremy's. And intimidation to control those closest to her. Jeremy looked down, battling guilt. I made sure the weight didn't stay on his shoulders. But someone helped me uncover the truth, I continued. Someone who risked their safety to reveal what was really happening behind that table. Jeremy's eyes widened as I faced the crowd again. Because standing up to abuse doesn't start when you're fearless. It starts when you're terrified. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. A woman near the front, one of the mothers who had avoided us at the cookout, raised her hand slightly. Is Ava okay? She asked softly. That question hit deeper than she knew. She's strong, I said. But this stress could have harmed her pregnancy. And Marjorie knew that. She targeted Ava anyway. Anger simmered again, but I kept my tone controlled. What she did isn't just wrong. It's criminal. The city and state are now investigating every action she has taken as part of this board. The camera crew zoomed in, capturing every word. The power Marjorie once wielded through secrecy now became leverage for accountability. Jeremy stepped forward again. Moving forward, he announced, gripping the podium tightly. This board commits to transparency, to resident safety, and to rewriting our bylaws to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. People clapped louder now. A few stood. The applause wasn't celebration. It was relief. A release of the grip fear held on every household. Then something unexpected happened. One by one, neighbors came forward. Sarah, the woman who had given Ava water, spoke first. I'm sorry we didn't speak up earlier. We should have. A father from the cul-de-sac followed. She treated everyone like suspects. We were afraid if we said something, we'd be next. Their apologies weren't excuses, just honesty long overdue. I nodded. What matters is that you're speaking up now. Communities are supposed to protect families, not interrogate them. A few board members came down from the table to shake my hand. The first real show of unity I'd seen since this ordeal began. As the meeting wound down, the City Housing Authority reps met with Jeremy and me privately. They explained that not only would Marjorie face civil rights and fraud charges, but the board would also undergo a full overhaul, new oversight, transparent leadership, real democracy, something this place clearly needed. Residents filtered out of the hall, many stopping to thank me or offer support for Ava. The same people who once stared at us with suspicion now carried remorse and sympathy. It didn't change the damage Marjorie caused, but it began healing the cracks she left behind. I stepped outside into the night, inhaling the fresh air as if for the first time. The street lamps reflected off the lake in the distance, guiding me home. I walked with purpose, steps quick, eager to reach the one person who deserved to hear good news more than anyone. The board meeting didn't just expose Marjorie, it revealed a community ready to become something better. Tomorrow would bring consequences, headlines, investigations, but tonight, I would finally walk back into my house and tell Ava we were safe. I walked home from the community center with the cool night air filling my lungs like relief itself. Every step felt lighter than the one before. The case wasn't fully closed yet, but the worst was over. Marjorie was gone. The board was rebuilding, and the investigation had already begun. Most importantly, Ava could finally breathe again without feeling someone was watching her from behind a clipboard. The porch light glowed as I approached, casting a soft halo over the swing. Ava sat there waiting for me, wrapped in a blanket, rocking gently. She looked up the moment she heard my footsteps and stood before I even reached the steps. The worry in her eyes melted into cautious hope when she saw the calm on my face. "It's done," I said. "She's gone." Ava's shoulders dropped, releasing tension she'd carried for weeks. She let out a breath that sounded like freedom. I pulled her into my arms and held her there for a long moment, feeling her heartbeat against my chest, steady and alive. When she leaned back, tears shimmered on her lashes, but these weren't from fear, they were from relief. We sat together on the swing, hands intertwined. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, gentle ripples reflecting the calm settling over our home. I told her everything, how the deputies intervened, how the community saw the truth, how Jeremy finally found his voice. She listened with her palm resting over her belly, as if our child could hear every detail. Maybe in some way, they could. A soft breeze brushed past us, carrying the faint laughter of kids playing somewhere down the street. That sound had once made Ava flinch, a reminder of what felt uncertain. Now, it felt like a promise of what came next. The next morning brought official news faster than either of us expected. A city official knocked politely and handed over a document confirming Marjorie's immediate removal from the HOA, and a temporary state-appointed oversight committee taking over operations. The fraudulent policies were revoked. Photos and surveillance evidence were seized. There was even mention of potential charges: harassment, falsification of government documents, violation of privacy laws. We weren't the only family she targeted, but we were the one that said no. Because sometimes it only takes one voice to bring down a bully who thinks they speak for everyone. When neighbors learned we were home and resting, they came by one at a time. Sarah brought muffins. The father from the cul-de-sac patched a loose fence board between our yards. People apologized, not because they were forced to, but because they finally understood how close they came to losing their freedom by staying silent. Fear had kept them quiet. Courage was waking them up. Jeremy visited last. He walked up nervously, hands jammed in his pockets. I thanked him for being braver than he knew. He thanked us for giving him a reason to be. He promised the HOA would protect families from now on, not tear them apart. Ava invited him to sit on the swing for a while. He did, awkwardly at first, then with a small smile, as he realized he was welcome. Everything about this place felt different now, lighter, brighter, alive again. Over the next week, the porch swing became more than just wood and rope. It became a gathering place, a symbol, proof that peace was something worth defending. The adhesive mark where the violation sticker once clung eventually faded, but the memory of why it was placed there never would. Ava's pregnancy continued strong. We spent evenings planning the nursery, imagining little feet running across the grass, picturing birthday parties by the lake. Every flutter of movement beneath her hand reminded us why we fought so hard, why we never backed down. One night, as we watched the sun disappear behind the houses that no longer felt threatening, Ava whispered, "We made this home safe." "We did," I said, kissing her temple gently. And we always will. HOAs aren't supposed to control people. They're supposed to support the communities they serve. But when someone twists power into a weapon, it takes real courage to stand up and say, "Not here, not my family." We chose to fight back, and because of that, every future child born on this street will live safer than ours almost did. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from.